126 years ago, right now, March 19th, 1904, it was also a Saturday. The Invocation of Horus. Crowley writes in his Confessions that Rose helped him write the invocation. After all, it was she who was falling into trances and communicating with something. She instructed me how to invoke Horus. The instructions were, from my point of view, pure rubbish. I suggested amending them. She emphatically refused to allow a single detail to be altered. She promised success, whatever that might mean, on Saturday or Sunday. And this year, the date, day of the month, matches the day of the week right now. So it was a Saturday. If I had any aspiration left at all, it was to attain samadhi, which I had not yet ever done. She promised that I should do so. I agreed to carry out her instructions avowedly in order to show her that nothing could happen if you broke all the rules. March 19th. I wrote out the ritual and did the invocation with little success. I was put off not only by my skepticism and the absurdity of the ritual, but having to do it in robes at an open window on a street at noon. She allowed me to make a second attempt at midnight. So right now is the first attempt, okay? And let's see where I've got here. And now I'm reading from the Equinox of the Gods, Crowley's Book of Results, diary, rituals, and scraps and fragments of things. March 19th, ritual written out and the invocation done. Little success. Okay. Here's the ritual. Invocation of Horus according to the divine vision of W, the seer. Urada the seer. To be performed before a window open to the east or north without incense. The room to be filled with jewels, but only diamonds to be worn. A sword unconsecrated. 44 pearl beads to be told. Stand. Bright daylight at 12:30 noon. Locked doors. White robes. Bare feet. Be very loud. Saturday. Use the sign of Apophis and Typhon. Now, the sign of Apophis and Typhon, most of you know, is standing perfectly erect and making a big V with your head thrown back. The famous V sign of Churchill is, according to legend at least, Churchill's invocation of Typhon. Now, Set Typhon in Egyptian mythology is who murders Osiris, who the way of looking at things, it's this, Apophis and Typhon, defeats the sun temporarily. And Crowley's idea was that the Nazi swastika was a solar symbol, and if England and Churchill was to defeat the swastika, they would do it with this sign. You can believe that if you want. I think there's a certain amount of truth in that, because England was trying everything at that time, and the Ian Fleming, who would go on to write James Bond. Ian Fleming was part of the intelligence apparatus of England at that time during the war, and he was friends of Aleister Crowley, and if reports can be believed, arranged a meeting with Crowley and Churchill. Be that as it may, I digress. The Invocation of Horus. Now, whenever, I'm not going to do the sign of Apophis and Typhon each time, but I'll indicate when it's supposed to be used. The above is Urata's instructions to various questions posed by P. Preliminary, banish, lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Then, lesser banishing ritual hexagram. Flaming sword. Abrahadabra, invoke as before. These are P's ideas for the ritual. But Urata said, omit. So that wasn't done. The manuscript of this ritual bears many internal marks of having been written in the white heat and left unrevised, save perhaps for one glance. There are mistakes in grammar and spelling unique to in all manuscripts of Frater P. The use of capitals is irregular and the punctuation almost wanting. Here we go. March 19th, 12:30 p.m. Cairo, Egypt. The Hyatt House Hotel. No. Starts with a confession. Now, Crowley knows he's breaking all the rules here. Okay, Rose is asking him to do all sorts of stuff that he would never do in a ritual. And here's how he sort of gets out of that with the confession. Walks into the temple. Unprepared and uninvoking, I, O.M., Frater R.R. et A.C., am here in thy presence, for thou art everywhere, O Lord Horus, to confess humbly before thee my neglect and scorn of thee. How shall I humble myself enough before thee? Thou art the mighty and unconquered Lord of the universe. I am a spark of thine unutterable radiance. How should I approach thee? But thou art everywhere. But thou hast graciously deigned to call me unto thee, to this exorcism of art, that I may be thy servant. Thine adept, O bright one, O Son of glory, thou hast called me. Should I not then hasten to thy presence? With unwashen hands, therefore I come unto thee, and I lament my wandering from thee. But thou knowest, yea, I have done evil. If one who was much obsessed with if one, and then he's going to refer to McGregor Mathers here, If one, and then in parentheses he says, doubtless a reference to SRMD, that's Mathers, who was much obsessed with Mars, saw Horus at first as Gebura. Okay, we talked about this yesterday, but let me go on, because this is how the confession reads. If one blaspheme thee, why should I therefore forsake thee? But thou art the avenger. All is with thee. I bow my neck before thee, as once thy sword was upon it. In a Golden Dawn ritual. So am I in thy hands. Strike if thou wilt, spare if thou wilt, but accept me as I am. My trust is in thee. Shall I be confounded? This ritual of art, this 40 and fourfold invocation, the sacrifice of blood, let's see. These I do not comprehend. It is enough if I obey thy decree. Did thy fiat go forth for my eternal misery? Were it not my joy to execute thy sentence upon myself? For why? For all is in thee and of thee. It is enough if I burn up in thine intolerable glory of thy presence. Enough. I turn toward thy promise. Doubtful are the words, dark are the ways, but in thy words and ways is light. Thus, then, now as ever, I enter the path of darkness, if haply so I may attain the light. Hail. And here's the invocation. Strike, strike the master chord, draw, draw the flaming sword, crown, child, and conquering lord, Horus, avenger. O thou of the head of the hawk, thee I invoke. And every time he says, thee I invoke, he makes the sign of Apophis and Typhon. So again, O thou head of the hawk, thee I invoke. Thou only begotten child of Osiris, thy father, and Isis, thy mother. He that was slain, she that bore thee in her womb, flying from the terror of the water. Thee I invoke. O thou whose apron is of the flashing white, whiter than the forehead of the morning, thee I invoke. O thou who hast formulated thy father and made fertile thy mother, thee I invoke. O thou whose garment is of golden glory with the azure bars of sky, thee I invoke. Thou who didst avenge the horror of death, thou the slayer of Typhon, thou who didst lift thine arms, and the dragons of death were as dust. Thou who didst raise thy head, and the crocodile of Nile was abased before thee, thee I invoke. O thou whose Nemesis hideth the universe with night, the impermeable blue, thee I invoke. Thou who travellest in the boat of Ra, abiding at the helm of the Aftet boat and the Sektet boat, thee I invoke. Thou who bearest the wand of double power, thee I invoke. Thou about whose presence is shed the darkness of blue light, the unfathomable glory of the outmost aether, the untraveled, the unthinkable immensity of space, who concentrateth all the 30 aethers in one darkling sphere of fire. Thee I invoke. Thou who bearest the rose and cross of life and light, thee I invoke. The voice of the 5, the voice of the 6, 11 are the voices. Abra Hadabra. Strike, strike the master chord, draw, draw the flaming sword, crown, child, and conquering lord, Horus, avenger. By thy name Ra, I invoke thee, hawk of the sun, the glorious one. By thy name Harmachis, youth of the brilliant morning, I invoke thee. By thy name Mao, I invoke thee, lion of the midday sun. By thy name Tum, hawk of the even crimson splendor of the sunset, Yi, I invoke thee. By thy name Kephra I invoke thee, O beetle of the hidden mastery of midnight. By thy name Heru Par Krat, Lord of silence, beautiful child that standeth on the dragon of the deep, I invoke thee. By thy name Apollo I invoke thee, O man of strength and splendor, O poet, O father. By thy name Phoebus, that drivest thy chariot through the heavens of Zeus, I invoke thee. By thy name of Odin, I invoke thee, O warrior of the north, O renown of the sagas. By thy name Yeshua, O child of the flaming star, I invoke thee. By thine own, thy secret name, Huri, thee I invoke. The names are 5, the names are 6, 11 are the names. Abra Hadabra. Behold, I stand in the midst. Mine is the symbol of Osiris. To thee are mine eyes ever turned. Unto the splendor of Gebura, the magnificence of Hesed, the mystery of Dath, thither I lift mine eyes. Thus have I sought, and I have sought the unity. Hear thou me. Mine is the head of the man, and my insight is keen as the hawk's. By my head I invoke thee. I am the only begotten child of my father and mother. My body, by my body I invoke thee. About me shines the diamonds of radiance white and pure. By their brightness I invoke thee. Mine is the red triangle reversed, the sign given of none save it be of thee, O Lord. By the lamen I invoke thee. Mine is the garment of white, sewn with gold, the flashing abai that I wear. By my robe I invoke thee. Mine is the sign of Apophis and Typhon. By the sign I invoke thee. Mine is the turban of white and gold, and mine the blue vigor of the intimate air. By my crown I invoke thee. My fingers travel on the beads of pearl, so I run after thee in thy car of glory. By my fingers I invoke thee. I bear the wand of double power in the voice of the Master, Abra Hadabra. By the word I invoke thee. Mine are the dark blue waves of music in the song I made of old to invoke thee. Strike, strike the master chord. Draw, draw the flaming sword. Crown, child, and conquering lord. Horus, avenger. By the song, I invoke thee. In my hand is the sword of revenge. Let it strike at thy bidding. By the sword, I invoke thee. The voice of the 5, the voice of the 6, 11 are the voices. Abrahadabra. The 4th section repeats the 1st section, only in the 1st person. Mine is the head of the hawk, Abrahadabra. I am the only begotten child of Osiris, my father, and Isis, my mother. He that was slain, she that bore thee in her womb, flying from the terror of the water, Abrahadabra. My apron is of flashing white, whiter than the forehead of the morning, Abrahadabra. I have formulated my father and made fertile my mother, Abrahadabra. My garment is of golden glory with the azure bars of sky, Abrahadabra. I did avenge the horror of death. I am the slayer of Typhon. I did lift mine arms, and the dragons of death were as dust. I did raise my head, and the crocodile of Nile was abased before me. Abrahadabra. My Nemes hideth the universe with night, the impermeable blue, Abrahadabra. I travel in the boat of Ra, abiding at the helm of the Aftet boat and the Sektet boat, Abrahadabra. I bearest the wand of double power, Abrahadabra. I, about whose presence is shed the darkness of blue light, the unfathomable glory of the outmost aether, the untraveled, unthinkable immensity of space. I, concentrist all 30 aethers in one darkling sphere of fire, Abrahadabra. I bearest the rose and cross of life and light, Abrahadabra. Therefore I say unto thee, come thou forth and dwell in me, so that my every spirit, whether of the firmament or of the aether, or of the earth or under the earth, on dry land, or in the water, or whirling air, or of rushing fire, and every spell and scourge of God, the fast one, may be thou. Abrahadabra. Then it simply says, the adoration impromptu. The note says, closed by banishing, and then in parentheses, I think this was omitted at W's order. The first time he did this at noon, or at 12:30, his diaries indicate with little result. But then he was told, to do it again at midnight. And I guess we'll have to pick it up from there tomorrow, because after that one, things started to pop. After the midnight one on March 20th officially, the Invocation of Horus was a success. But we'll see about that tomorrow. For Sunday school, until then, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.